Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gratitude to Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Gencha for the comprehensive report on the situation in the Gaza Strip and the issue of hostages remaining in the enclave. We note the presence among us of Israel's Foreign Minister, Gideon Sa'ar. We listened carefully to Eli David and reviewed the letter from the Israeli side. We mourn all the innocent victims of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, regardless of their citizenship or nationality. Like everyone present here, we were shocked by the footage published earlier this month of two Israeli hostages, Ram Breslavsky and aviator David. Judging by the videos, they appear distressed, extremely exhausted, and weakened due to an acute shortage of food and water, which, as we know, affects all residents of Gaza. Every day spent by the hostages in the Gaza Strip is a tragedy for them and for their loved ones, who await their return every minute. We have also carefully reviewed the recent statements by the relatives of Romy Breslavsky, aviator David, and other Israelis held in Gaza. We share their pain, but we cannot fail to note that from the mouths of people in an extremely difficult emotional state, worried about the fate of their children, there is also direct criticism of the country's leadership, which, in the opinion of some of them, by delaying the negotiation process with Hamas, is effectively signing a death sentence for the remaining living hostages. Let me remind you that we immediately condemned the tragic events of October 7, 2023, which can have no justification. Just as there can be no justification for the collective punishment of Gaza's residents and the transformation of an entire region into a zone of total despair, we have advocated and continue to advocate for the immediate and unconditional release of all detained persons and an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Mr. Chairman, we are sincerely convinced that there is not a single delegation in this room that would dispute the simple fact that every human life is important and priceless. We must not choose whose pain deserves more attention. This applies fully and equally to both the Israelis held in captivity and the peaceful Palestinians, who, for nearly 670 days, have been living under almost daily Israeli bombings. While the entire world watched in horror the shocking footage of Ram Breslavsky and aviator David, Gaza reported shocking data about the deaths of over 180 people between August 1st and 2nd. We hear of such tragedies almost daily. Since October 2023, more than 61,000 Palestinians have been reported killed, including, according to UNICEF, over 18,000 children. Against this backdrop, the situation in Gaza can only be described as a humanitarian catastrophe, with consequences not only for Gazans, but also for the Israeli hostages. Palestinians in the enclave are dying not only from airstrikes and artillery shells, but also due to widespread famine and outbreaks of various diseases. According to the UN World Food Programme, every third Palestinian has been going hungry for days. The grim statistics of casualties from hostilities and food shortages are compounded by those killed and injured in queues for food rations at the sites of the so-called Humanitarian Fund for Gaza. The toll runs into the thousands. Since May 27th, nearly 1,500 Palestinians have been killed. Serious concern is also raised by the consequences of the resumed practice since late July of airdropping food aid pallets. Just yesterday, humanitarian bombs crushed 2 medical workers at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. Commissioner General Lazzarini, in his recent comments, warned against the continued use of this highly dangerous and costly aid delivery method, which is 100 times more expensive than using land routes. Meanwhile, over 6,000 trucks with food supplies, enough to sustain the civilian population for several months, are stationed along the enclave's perimeter. Mr. Chairman, we are shocked by the targeted IDF attack on the headquarters of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society in Khan Yunis, which resulted in the death of an employee and injuries to several others. Unfortunately, this is not the first instance of the killing of Red Crescent Society members in Gaza. We all remember how Israeli forces brutally shot ambulance workers from this organization, whose bodies were found in a mass grave in March. We call on Israel to stop this lawlessness. Humanitarian and medical workers must not become targets, just as the Red Crescent Society's headquarters, clearly marked with its emblem, is unequivocally protected under international humanitarian law. Contrary to claims from West Jerusalem, the humanitarian blockade of the enclave imposed since March effectively persists to this day. The partial relaxations and limited supplies announced since July 27 within the framework of so-called tactical pauses are, according to UN humanitarian structures, a drop in the ocean compared to the acute needs of Gazans, including, as we all understand, the needs of Israeli hostages. In this context, we fully support the calls from the leadership of UNRWA and other relevant UN agencies for the immediate removal of obstacles to delivering all necessary aid to Gaza, including food, water, fuel, and medicine. We are extremely concerned about the aggressive campaign launched by West Jerusalem against UN OCHA staff and its head, Tom Fletcher, who provide candid and often uncomfortable assessments of the humanitarian situation in the enclave. We see that UN humanitarian workers are genuinely striving to comprehensively analyze the situation and find ways to at least somewhat improve the dire situation of peaceful Palestinians. The undeniable truth remains that establishing uninterrupted and unimpeded humanitarian aid deliveries requires one key thing: creating the necessary safe conditions. Unfortunately, but regular calls for a ceasefire, voiced by both the UN Secretary-General and the overwhelming majority of the international community, remain without due response from the Israeli leadership. West Jerusalem remains determined to wage war in Gaza by any means and under any pretext, seeking to avoid halting the military operation in the sector. Mr. Chairman, no less concern is caused by the course chosen by the Israeli authorities for the cleansing and colonization of the West Bank. Ordinary Palestinians and even foreigners fall victim to relentless raids by security forces and settler violence daily. On July 30th, an official vehicle of the Russian representation to the Palestinian Authority was attacked, with the complicity of Israeli forces. Moreover, new records are being set for the destruction and expropriation of local residents' property, the construction of new settlements, and the legalization of outposts to cut off major Palestinian cities from one another. The Knesset continues to adopt new provocative resolutions. Following last year's decisions to ban UNRWA, a no less dangerous resolution was adopted in late July to extend Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank. It is obvious that the large-scale dispossession of Palestinians, whether from Gaza or the West Bank, poses new risks to the stability and security of the Middle East and could once again bring the region to the brink of a major war. It is also clear that Israel's complete freedom of action in Gaza and the West Bank would not be possible without direct military support and international political cover from the United States. At the same time, the overwhelming majority of the world's states reject this approach. The U.S.-Israeli boycott of the high-level international conference held on July 28 to 30th in support of a two-state solution, as well as Washington's repeated attempts to dissuade its partners from participating in this representative forum, are indicative in this regard. Some optimism is inspired by the fact that despite open pressure from the Americans, the majority of the international community was not intimidated and showed solidarity with the Palestinian people. Some Western capitals, albeit with significant delay, have announced plans to recognize the State of Palestine as early as next month. Mr. Chairman, despite the gravity of the current situation, we remain convinced that diplomatic resolution of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict was and remains the only viable solution. We call on the parties, with the support of mediators, to return to the negotiating table to work out mutually acceptable solutions to restore the ceasefire regime, release detained persons, and unblock humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip. We are confident that this is exactly what the residents of Palestine and the families of the hostages, including the loved ones of the Israelis held in Gaza, want. We hope that all regional and international actors will work precisely in this direction. The negotiation process must be returned to the political track, which would allow for consideration of both Israel's legitimate security interests and the hard-won right of the Palestinian people to establish their own state within the 1967 borders. We express our gratitude for your briefing in your capacity as chairman of the UN Security Council committee established pursuant to Resolution 1540. Taking this opportunity, we would like to congratulate you on your appointment as its chairman. We support the efforts of our Panamanian colleagues to promptly address the various issues on the committee's agenda. Over the more than 2 decades since its adoption in 2004, UN Security Council Resolution 1540 has repeatedly proven its relevance as a universal international document aimed at depoliticized cooperation among states and assisting them in preventing weapons of mass destruction, their delivery systems, and related materials from falling into the hands of non-state actors. The Russian Federation remains steadfastly committed to the goals and objectives of the resolution, having been one of the initiators of its preparation and directly participating in the development of its core provisions. We are convinced that this document retains its importance and unifying potential. We believe that ensuring a positive perception of Resolution 1540 by all member states should remain an unconditional priority for the work of the 1540 Committee. Therefore, it is crucial to preserve the spirit of cooperation inherent in Resolution 1540 and to ensure the comprehensive and inclusive nature of relevant interactions. Any disruptions in the committee's work only benefit those who seek to undermine international non-proliferation efforts. In this regard, we believe that future issues with the committee's operations must be avoided. Furthermore, the provisions of Resolution 1540, which impose significant obligations on national authorities, must not be used as a pretext for interfering in the internal affairs of states. The committee itself must act strictly within the scope of its mandate, as outlined in other relevant Security Council resolutions. Assigning the committee functions that are not inherent to it, including oversight and control, is unacceptable. Its key tasks are to monitor the implementation of Resolution 1540's provisions and to coordinate global efforts in providing technical assistance to states upon their request. In this context, our side consistently advocates for tactful approaches by the committee in its interactions with national governments without exerting artificial pressure on them. It is also of fundamental importance that this subsidiary body of the Security Council focuses on its direct tasks related to the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. It is unacceptable to artificially introduce into its work other topics that go beyond the scope of Resolution 1540, such as counter-terrorism, digital development, information security, or sanctions-related issues. It is also important to remember that the group of experts operating under the committee is strictly accountable to it and can act only on its instructions. We are also interested in the swift resolution of the issue of filling vacant positions in the group of experts, which would only contribute to enhancing the committee's effectiveness. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I would like to assure you that the Russian Federation is always open to constructive cooperation within the framework of the committee to fulfill its critical tasks.